This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
Well. You're going to be glad you tuned in. So here's the thing. Just like many riders don't fully understand the mechanics of their bikes or take the time to get in tune with them, me being one of them, people often do the same with their bodies when it comes to what brings them pleasure or deeper intimacy. Again, me being one of them. In this episode, we sit down with fellow rider Kristina Sheridan, owner of Coastal Clarity Discomfort Spa. Yes, you heard that, Discomfort Spa in Nova Scotia. Kristina's here to help us explore the world of BDSM. Okay, that is bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, masochism. I know it makes you pause, but hear us out. It's a topic that many see as taboo, but it really shouldn't be. We're using this interview to ask the questions you may have been afraid or never thought to ask yourself. See, our nervous system can imprint experiences based on our first sexual encounters or even intimacy. Often, those first experiences aren't great, and they can even be negative or traumatic. And this leads to not only dissatisfaction or shame, but it prevents us from further exploration. BDSM can be a powerful tool for personal growth by providing a way to release and exchange energy, foster deeper connections, shed that shame, and strive towards sexual freedom. So when you explore your boundaries and you trust within a safe and consensual environment, individuals, they can experience a profound sense of empowerment and self-discovery. Kinks, desires, you shouldn't be ashamed of them. They should be explored and celebrated. Kristina shares her journey of bringing the world's first discomfort spa to life, what to expect in the dungeon, and her reasons for wanting to do so with this work. She offers insights in how BDSM can be used therapeutically to help people connect with their true selves. So, rev up your curiosity engines. This is your motivation.
I'm so happy that this episode is finally happening with Kristina of Coastal Clarity Discomfort Spa. First of all, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, in traditional Canadian fashion, the reason why it didn't work out the first time, it was twofold. Number one, if you're a listener here, you know, A, my life blew up. And number two, so were things in your way in Nova Scotia blowing all over the place and blew out your internet completely. So finally, we're able to unite, and I'm really happy because this is a conversation that we've actually never dove into on the podcast, and I think something most humans have a lot of curiosity over. So, for example, I was just away, and a good friend of mine, we were talking about sexuality and sex experiences that we've had and what we were exposed to. And I grew up in an ultra Catholic family. Shame was the name of the game. It really isn't something that promotes getting in tune with oneself, never mind having the vulnerability to share yourself with another and play with that. Obviously, as I got older, you start to explore a little bit more, but my line of what I was familiar with, I have learned even in recent times, isn't the scope of what's available in the world. So she actually had shown me her FetLife app at the time and just showed me her profile. And she said, I just want you to press on the descriptions and ask questions. And we actually spent some time where I'm like, what is this? What is this? And then certain things she'd say, I was like, oh, I would like that. Like you have this deep curiosity to explore. So I'm stoked because if you heard what I said at the beginning here, I started off by saying discomfort spa. And the beauty of that terminology in what we will discover here is that what you do is really the opposite of discomfort in a large way because it is about creating connection with another individual and with yourself. It is about stepping into what I think is the ultimate vulnerability because it's one thing to say, another thing to allow yourself to show, and can really provide deeper meaning in life, which is not what I think most of us think of if we hear BDSM. So, first of all, Kristina, how did you even get introduced to this community? Because much like motorcycles, it is a community.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge community. I've been part of the community for about 20 years now. It all started in Newfoundland. So I was there for university, and I was really deeply involved in the burlesque community there when I was 17, 18. And I started doing the home-based, like basically equivalent to Tupperware parties, but sex toy parties. So I would go around, and it kind of paid for my undergrad. So I was doing like a couple of sex toy parties a week. And with that, there was a lot of like ongoing education pieces that I would be involved in, and, you know, teaching lots of people about different toys and implements, and then kind of going to some community events and gatherings. So it kind of all stemmed from there, and then it just kind of skyrocketed. And then when I moved to Vancouver in 2013, I became like more involved in the latex community, and then it kind of ramped it up even more. And now I'm kind of heavily involved, and there's obviously a lot of overlap between the two, but yeah, very heavily involved in both of those communities. So
you talk about 17 years old being in these sex parties. So so we had these parties come around in our hometown too, but it was always like some woman in her like late 20s, early 30s, and everyone was like, woo, right? Like squealing with excitement. But I can't imagine a 17-year-old coming in there and be like, ladies. So that leads me to believe that earlier in your life, there was an extreme comfortability with sexuality. And is that fair to say? And like, what did that look like for you growing up that was different from like the Catholic guilt or the like hypersexualized for men that I grew up within?
Yeah. Someone actually asked me this question the other day. So when I was 12, I was doing a photo shoot for this like hair company, and they put me in a metal transparent, right? See-through attire.
No.
So like top and bottom completely. And so my mom was there, and she was like, absolutely not. This is like child pornography. Like, you can't wear this. And I was like, this is amazing. I must own this piece of clothing. And I think
having it in your backpack.
Yeah, that definitely like sparked thing. I mean, they obviously put me in something else.
Right.
But that was kind of a little spark. And at the time I was dating someone that I actually I ended up dating for like 13 years. And at that time when I was 12, I was having sex, which is crazy to think about.
Banana pants. Yeah.
But honestly, I think, and I was really lucky in that, like, my parents, there was no shame ever involved in sex or sexuality.
Good.
I've been so lucky with, like, obviously my support that I have with my parents, who like helped me build my dungeon and are in full support of everything that I'm doing. And in fact, when I told them about my idea and what I wanted to accomplish here, they went and watched the Netflix documentary, How to Build a Sex Room. And they watched every episode of it to get some ideas of how to help me build the dungeon. So
wow.
Yeah, I've been
Cool.
so lucky that I never dealt with the shame around sexuality. I mean, I've been bisexual my entire life, and my parents have always been really accepting of that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I think it started very young, maybe even younger than that. But yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Wasn't squashed or tampered or like, or, you know, and that, so that you had to find out, you know, squealing like a 30-year-old woman in a living room, you know, 15 years later, you got to it earlier and been like, let's explore, let's have fun.
Exactly.
Well, and that lack of shame makes a big difference, because I remember even the time my mom found condoms in my study drawer in my room, and it was like I had set a building on fire versus it being a conversation. And you're like, cool, more shame. Thank you. Pile it on. So I've had to work through my adult life to untangle that. I want to know the whole story of how we got here, but I think because I have been on your page and seen what the experience is like. But before we get to the story of how you got there, because we keep referring to this dungeon. So how about you describe what you have built so people can understand what we are speaking to and the magnitude of what you've created, and not just the magnitude, the fact fact that you've created and brought something to life that didn't exist anywhere else?
So the space is, we started building in 2022 and it's now complete minus putting in a pool liner this weekend. So that's coming up. But basically the dungeon space is about 1,500 square feet. So it has everything that you can imagine, from St. Andrew's Cross to machines to implements, tantra bench. There's like a viewing platform and a loungy kind of cuddle area for everyone. So it's just a space where people can explore and do so in a safe environment. There's lots of education that I offer. So there's always the opportunity of people, if there's a new toy that they've never seen before, it's a space where people can try things out without going and buying them all and really figuring out, what do you like? What don't you like? So that you're not spending copious amounts of money on equipment that you might not even enjoy.
And what happens at a retreat?
Yeah, so we've done 4 now, and we focus primarily on couples, although we'll be doing some singles ones coming up. But the retreats are really focused on education around, energetic exchange, around dominance and submission, around learning different techniques to kind of help build communication, identifying your desires and learning how to speak them. And just as important as that is like learning what are your no's and what don't you like and what are your dislikes and how do we communicate that without, offending a partner or making them feel uncomfortable with expressing your no's as well. There's lots of like decompression time, and then couples get private time in the dungeon as well as kind of community time. So the day is worked out in that there's generally education pieces throughout the day. There's time to decompress and try to synthesize some of the information. And then the evenings are an open dungeon time for exploration. And then on the Saturday night, we do a big protocol dinner, which is basically, I'm guessing I should describe that. Probably.
Yeah, please. Because I'm like, the thing is like, I just know there are so many people that have heard the word, have perhaps seen some of the items used, and then insert in between like 9 million judgments and misunderstandings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So our protocol dinner is really beautiful. Basically, we do anywhere between 8 to 12 courses. And then for each course, we would do a suggested protocol pairing. So an example of this might be the submissive cannot take a bite of dinner bigger than their dominant. So that's just one example of many. And that kind of builds throughout the evening. And so then, for example, if they forget, so maybe their dom grabs a paddle and gives them a little spank, or something that they've kind of identified as something that would be fun for them to do. And they're not mandatory. So we always give them the menu beforehand so that they can kind of talk about it and discuss what feels good for them and their dynamic. And but in every protocol dinner we've done, everyone's been fully involved and doing all parts of it, which has been really beautiful.
That's really cool. What would be an example for those of us listening that are, really quite new and to this, and say we came to one of these retreats and the example or an example around a way in which to communicate what we're curious about or what we'd like to try? What would that even look like or sound like?
So what I give all of the participants before they come is actually, I've made an Excel file that probably has close to 300 different like kinks and fetishes. And so for each of those, there's a yes, no, a maybe. And then if you have explored it, whether you liked it, disliked it, maybe something you want to do more of. Yeah. So I have everyone fill this out before they even come, so that it can take some time and work through it. And some of them are unknowns. Like some people are like, I don't even know what that means, or I don't know, maybe I like it and maybe I don't. So then what I do is I take both of the couples' worksheets and I combine them. So I look at where are there crossovers in both of their yeses. And then those are the things that we explore first. And then we go into the maybes, and the no's are just completely off the board. We don't talk about
Right.
them. There might be trauma associated with them. And for some people, if their nose, occasionally people want to step into that discomfort. Maybe they've had trauma and they want to, feel healthier, feel happier around those pieces. But starting with the yeses and the maybes is certainly a better way of approaching it. And so that's kind of how I've done it. And it's been really beautiful. I usually have them choose like a top 5 or 10 things they might want to explore over the 4 or 5 days. And some check way more than that off their bucket list. It really just depends on the level of curiosity and adventurousness that they're feeling.
Well, and you highlight a good point too around the traumas, because it's even in like recent time, I was reading like how a lot of individuals, if they're able to act it out, even though it was a traumatic thing at the time, it actually is extremely therapeutic. So when you hear BDSM, I feel like therapeutic is not a word that we would initially associate. So can you talk to me a little bit about the fact that it is a modality that can be used in that facet?
Yeah. And I think that right now there's so much research going into using BDSM as a healing modality. I can't even count the amount of times where I've seen people and like one couple that was here, the last couple said that one weekend at the retreat was 30 years of couples counseling for them.
Wow.
Yeah. So just like what people can work through and, develop these new, connections in their brain and new associations with a memory. And I think like in my clinical world, I look at it as a form of exposure therapy. And obviously like my two worlds are very different, but there's so much overlap between the two. And so, you wouldn't, if someone was scared of water, you wouldn't throw them into a pool, but you would gently expose them to water and kind of build up their tolerance to that until it becomes safe and healthy for them to do so. So we do the same thing with BDSM. And I think that for a lot of people, when they get to explore in a really safe environment where they know that they're not going to be hurt and they're going to be respected and that there's communication and trust in a way that they can express their desires and their boundaries and know that consent is key. And also that there's going to be appropriate aftercare and everything, then it's going to really lead to a stronger relationship with themselves and with their partners.
Even the safety is so important because so many of us have our first experience sexually or many of them afterwards.
Yep.
Very few of them feel safe. We're all just kind of fumbling and bumbling through, and you're experimenting with, whether you're half drunk or fully drunk, or even if you're sober, you might feel pressured because, the partner might go back to school and share things, or they do share things. And then it goes rumors. So there's so much small traumas and large traumas in our sexuality and our sexual experiences growing up. And so we always often correlate anything outside of the kind of box as being like, gosh, some of us have had traumas within the box. I can't even imagine what outside of the box would look like versus it's not the sexual experiences, it's how in which you gave meaning and that you experience that sexual experience. So I just love that this is such a opportunity to explore, but the priority is safety and consent. And like the aftercare part was just even, I was like, yes, because sometimes you feel a certain way and then all of a sudden guilt flies in. You don't even know where it's coming from afterwards. And you were so into it. And then what do you do with that? So even having that aftercare.
I was just going to say that guilt piece, like, because that is something that I'm sure, especially if it was like the maybe and they go for it, how do you help them navigate that if it's starting to crop up?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times all it comes down to is communication. And so people learn how to communicate what's coming up for them in those moments. And the more that we can verbalize what's going on in our brains, same as it is with anything, like whether it's work-related stress or relationship stress, the better that we are at communication, the better that our nervous systems feel, because we can just, if we can say what's going on and our partners can help us work through it, then it alleviates all of that unnecessary burden that we're carrying when we're carrying a lot of that trauma. And I think that, obviously there's so many, when we're doing this type of play, there's so many endorphins and other kind of feel good hormones that are running through our body that, we do have this like sense of euphoria that comes. And there is, like you said, a bit of like guilt that can kind of come up because we have either like another association with it or a fear of like, what if we like this thing too much? And what if our partners don't like it? And what does this all mean? And I think that a lot of people find that the more that they communicate with their partners, the more they realize their partners completely understand and just want to be there and help support them through it. And even internally, if you're exploring some of this stuff on your own, and a lot of people are here exploring on their own as well, I think that that's why we have myself and other facilitators that are there to help people navigate as things come up.
Do people generally walk into your space already leaning into this world, or have you ever had anybody that's like, I am just deeply curious?
Oh yeah, I've had probably 5 couples that had 0 experience whatsoever.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That like
So
they must have felt so nervous stepping in. Like, how do you build that trust? Because I feel like you must have to build a rapport so quickly to allow a space for people to lean in.
It's I would say, like, it's a very gentle entrance. So there's a lot of, we don't even go down into the dungeon until later in the evening on the first night. So there's a lot of like chatting. The way that the space is set up, there's kind of a big like grand room space with a couch that like 20 people can sit on. So we kind of like sit around and chat. People kind of set their intentions or desires for the week. And I think that the more that people are able to, like those that are around them that are comfortable talking about it, it gives those that are maybe a little bit not as comfortable permission to feel like, oh, everyone here is talking about it so openly and freely. That makes it so much easier for me. And I think I'm pretty lucky in that, when I talk about sex and sexuality and BDSM, it's something that comes really natural to me and something that I'm really passionate about. And so there's never any, I think people just naturally feel like comfortable in the space. And, yeah, and we kind of do like some little icebreakers and that kind of stuff, have dinner together and kind of let people settle into the space, go and have a sauna or a cold plunge and kind of just get settled in first. And then, and then a gentle first evening where it's more about, I generally do like here's a brief overview of some of the implements, and I'll do like a demo scene of like, here's an example of what this might look like. Having the submissive kind of talk about like what their experience is and kind of verbalizing, this is what I like, this is the pressure I like, doing check-ins, showing aftercare and showing people kind of what that looks like. I think that helps to have a gentler landing.
Oh, do people naturally know like whether they're dominant or submissive landing, or how do people tap into, or I guess could that also switch?
It can definitely switch. I've seen that happen a number of times. I think people have an idea, like you might have a little inkling as to like whether you're dominant or submissive or whether you're a switch. And then you might get in the space and you're like, actually, it might feel good to just be on the bottom and not have to think and to be able to turn my brain off, especially if you're, lots of people that are in roles where you're, in control of everything at work and you're, managing multiple people and kind of those busier jobs. It's nice to have a space where you don't have to always be in control. So
that's me. Yeah. Like, time up and let me hang out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Busy brain, gotta shut down.
Yeah. And it's nice to have a space to do that because, when you are kind of boss babes, it's hard. And I think that that's the case for a lot of people. So yeah, people have an idea and then some people come and they want to experience both sides of it. And so that's certainly been an option and what a lot of couples will explore. Like maybe one night, one will be submissive and the next night, the other will be dominant. And some people stay in their dynamics for the entirety of the weekend, like couples that already have a dynamic outside of coming here, then they've stayed in that dynamic for the weekend. But yeah, there's definitely lots of flexibility in that for sure.
How have you found that what kind of sticks out for you when it comes to things that have really surprised you of what you've learned even about yourself or about kind of that world over this last, making that transition into building this environment, creating this environment, implementing this environment, and now being a bit into it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like we've kind of joked over the last couple of months in that, where things have gone not the way that you planned. So, the person that I moved here with, that I built the space with, we're no longer together. And so my friend that I co-run the space with, Nicole, she was like, you built a place for discomfort, so step into it. And so, like I'm learning just as much as anyone who comes here, there's going to be a level of discomfort that comes. And also, there's times where there's people in the dungeon and maybe they're exploring dynamics that are not typically what I would do in my relationships. And so it's, there's like seeing new things and it also like exploring new things that maybe also make me a little bit uncomfortable. And so for me, it's also a learning experience and really beautiful because I have a better understanding of what it's like for people that are seeing new things. It's been a long time since I've seen things that are new. And I think that there's places where I've been, like, Berlin, where you go to a club and you're surrounded by like thousands of people doing all kinds of, or having all kinds of like debauchery. And I think there's always like a little bit of like level of discomfort, but also a little bit of like, ooh, that might be exciting, or what does that look like? I've always been dominant from the beginning. In the last 6 months, I've had kind of 2 experiences with submission. I would say one that was very positive and one that was not. And so for me, it's been really enlightening to have an understanding of what it feels like for someone that has a not so great experience in submission. And I think also, when people come here and I'll do like scenes with people so that they can kind of, experience if they don't have a partner. And I would say that in a lot of environments, including the Garden of Earthly Delights that Nicole and I do together, there's so many women that feel like really safe in doing scenes with me because of the level of care that I give and how much like love I put into it and thought. And so I think I have appreciation of like what it's like for women to have scenes with people that think that they know everything and really don't know a lot. And how easy it is for people to have this mask of like, I know everything and I'm this, I've been in this community for so long. I think it really, there's important questions and now it's like a part of what I help to teach here too, is like, just as important it is when you're a dominant and you're trying to match with a submissive, what are the questions that you have as a submissive that you're asking to the dominant? Like you're asking them like, what does aftercare look like to you? And what does dom drop look like? And what do you need support? So putting all these things into place so that you feel as a submissive that you're also in control and that you're safe in those spaces, especially when you're in a, very vulnerable state and, or in like altered level of consciousness that can come with being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, just like on that, because I know that you talked about one of the pillars was that energy exchange. So just with you saying that altered state, can you elaborate a little bit on the meaning of that? Because again, I'm sure we have listeners that maybe they identify like more enjoyment in vanilla land, but then they're hearing this and they're like, oh, like it might be safe to dip my toe. So I'm like, what is that state that can be achieved?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people, we call it subspace, but it's kind of, I want to say it's equivalent to like, even with psychedelics, there's kind of this overlap that occurs. And I mean, maybe some listeners are not familiar with their experience with psychedelics as well. But kind of you get in this altered state where, this like peacefulness comes and, you're not thinking about anything. You're kind of floating in a kind of like in another state. You're not worrying about things. You're not overthinking. You don't have a lot of pain. It's just kind of a calm place that you're in. And it's really, really beautiful to experience. And I think it's something that, with the right person and in the right, set and setting, you can accomplish. And it's a really beautiful thing to get to experience.
Yeah, it's funny
especially
when you
together.
setting. Yes.
Because they even have
Like,
so much now showing the essentially like your neural pathways matching up when you're sharing that energy with one another. So even if you're with somebody that can, and it doesn't have to be just through a sexual experience, but I can only imagine this being that much more heightened.
Mhm.
And with that person that goes into that space, you're actually more likely to go into that space, into that interconnected. And so to both of you to be rocking in that zone and that flow state, if you will, for a lack of a
Absolutely.
better description,
Yeah.
and it being a sexual experience.
Yeah.
When I say sexual experience, is there a better way to describe it than just because it feels like such a blah way to
Yeah.
say something that's so much bigger than that?
Yeah, I actually, and I've never used like sexual experience because for me, I actually like have never had sex with any submissives that I've played with apart from a primary partner. So it's, for me, it's not like sexual, it's intimate. It's
That's a
extremely
great
intimate.
word.
Yeah. There's this like beautiful level of like trust and love and respect that comes from it. And it can be sexual and it can be like,
Yeah.
like bits of that. But for me, and obviously like my experience as a dom is very different than others. And there's lots of doms that do have sex with their submissives. That's just not how I show up in the space. So for me, it's really about like intimacy and connection and communication and really focusing on like developing really beautiful and deep, meaningful relationships with people.
well, and on that note, because I know obviously we've spoken a lot to the fact that couples enter the space. And as you said, one of them was like, it was like 30 years of therapy, but you do run Garden of Earthly Delights as well and have alluded that you are looking to do something for singles. Because I'm sure there's many listeners saying that's great, but like maybe I just want to explore myself and where the boundaries are. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so I've done one kind of community event here so far, and so that was a variety. There was about 45 people, and so there were singles and there were couples, and we had 5 performances throughout the evening. So we had a 16-foot aerial rig, and someone did aerial performances. We had burlesque dancers and fire performances, and the kind of like scattered throughout the evening. And then the dungeon space was open throughout the evening. And then what we did is we allocated bedrooms for penetration only, so that when people went down into the dungeon, it was like not a thing that people had to be exposed to if they didn't want to be. And then at 2:00 a.m., the bedrooms turned into sleeping spaces for people. But that way it felt like people can explore S&M and or BDSM in the dungeon without, kind of the added confrontation of that layer.
Well, you're making the boundaries very clear. Like for people, like this is, if you're feeling that this is the level, like then perfect.
Totally.
You don't need to see or do anything that you're not feeling comfortable with.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the plan is kind of to do like, that was a one evening event, and probably do like a couple of those like community events that are open to the public a couple of times a year. And then the Garden of Earthly Delights that Nicole started and that I co-run with her, we'll be doing our first one of those in Nova Scotia in the fall. So I'm really excited for that. And that's a women's only event, with the exception of we generally have male submissives at it that serve the event, which is really lovely. And so yeah, in Vancouver and Toronto, we were running those anywhere between 45 to 50 women. And same kind of idea, a one evening event that would have, education component, and then kind of an opening ceremony together, and then just a space for women to feel like really safe to express their desires and bring them into reality. So yeah,
talk to me more about that
cool.
experience, because I just know like collectively when we have all this feminine energy in one space and just the walls that can be broken there, like talk to me about the progression that you see in people from when they walk into that space. And I imagine whether you're very experienced or not, that's overwhelming to be like, this is a space with 40 to 50 other women. How do I let my walls down enough to actually lean into that?
I think there's a couple pieces to it, in that anyone who's showing up to that space has already set an intention to be there. And most people have a pretty good awareness of what they're showing up for. And so obviously your participation in that can vary. So some people might come and just be an observer and might just want to sit back and watch and kind of see, okay, what does this look like to see and to experience? Because a lot of it is new. I would say, 50 to 60% of people that are coming there have no experience whatsoever. And so even just like being in the space and watching is really like fun and exciting, and can also bring up a lot of emotion as well, both positive and sometimes pretty confronting things. And then others might want to, dip their toe in the water and learn how to use a flogger, or they might want to feel what it is like to be on the receiving end of that. And for me, I never use an implement on someone that I've not experienced on myself. It's my number one rule in BDSM. If you haven't experienced it, you should not be providing that to anyone. And so anytime that I have someone wanting to learn an implement, I show them how to use it, and then I show them how it feels so that they can have an idea. And then, we generally have like submissives around that are open to like being someone on the bottom end of that, so that the women feel like they can safely explore and practice. And so that's a really nice thing. And also having a space of multiple, dominants that are happy to provide that for people that want to experience what it feels like. And then there's some people that are really excited to use, like we have machines. So there's, a Sibian, or we have a fucking machine. So like different machines that people can explore that, are like thousands of dollars to buy, but then you can explore them in a space like this and see if it's something that you like.
The level of vulnerability that needs to come down to allow that, like it's super courageous for people to step in and like provide that for themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably one of the most, I guess it's the most vulnerable that you can be, really, especially in a space with that many people. I think that because it's the shared experience and a shared vulnerability, most people can relate to how you're feeling. And yes, there's definitely people like myself that are very, very comfortable in those spaces. But I think like having an awareness and like, doing lots of check-ins on how people are doing. And I mean, I feel like reading the room and kind of doing like check-ins around like throughout the evening and seeing how things are going, but also offering decompression spaces. So we always have a room set up where there is no toys, no like nothing happening in it, so that, okay, I'm feeling overstimulated. I need a space that I can escape to that's quiet and peaceful and I don't have to worry. And so that's always a space that we have for people. And it's frequently used. Even if it's just, I need 10 minutes to just breathe for a minute. Those spaces are really essential.
What if you like your pie in the sky ideal, what do you want to ultimately build and create in the pie in the sky, scaffolding on all of this?
It's kind of like the $1 million question. And I feel like it shifts quite a bit.
Yeah.
But where I'm at right now, I kind of have two different components that I'm running and / hoping to run out of here. So I just finished my advanced psychedelic therapist certification. And so
fantastical.
So from a clinical perspective, my hope is to start doing, so the program that I did is through ATMA, and they're associated with the Government of Canada Special Access Program. And so Veterans Affairs and Workers' Compensation and a lot of long-term disability providers are going to start covering treatment, and some already have. So I now have a nurse practitioner, and I'm working on onboarding a physician as well.
Incredible.
Yeah. So that's my the thing that I'm like very, very, very passionate about, and that I hope to switch my clinical world into, and that will happen here. So that's why I have the pool and the sauna and the cold plunge, so that after people have done their psychedelic therapy, they have a decompression space for that. And so that's one part, and hopefully I can start doing that either kind of wintertime or spring of next year. That's kind of where that will go. And then with the retreats, the BDSM retreats, that will probably, I'd say I hope to run about 4 couples retreats a year, maybe like 3 singles events, and then at least 3 or 4 community events a year. They obviously are like really energy heavy.
Yeah.
They require a lot. I think, in the future, I've been doing like all of the cooking for the entire retreat myself.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Good Lord, woman.
And I've seen the dishes. They've looked like phenomenal. She is not serving up burgers, guys.
Like a jack of all trades.
Yeah, cooking is my like third passion. So yeah, all the tasting menus and stuff I've been doing, and the retreat that I just did on Bowen Island, I did the cooking for the entire retreat for the 6 days. So yeah, so
We're
ideally,
extra impressed you joined us today because we would all be napping.
Yeah, so ideally, I'd have a staff that I can like start hiring, and just kind of delegating some of it. It's definitely a lot for one person, and I always have like 1 or 2 facilitators, but they kind of more stick to like their education components and not as much around the cooking and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think like having a bigger staff will allow me to probably do them more frequently, but yeah, we'll kind of see how that goes. But that's kind of
yeah, because like just talking about the psychedelic component, and I know just how they have such this incredible ability to like speak to our knowing, or really bring our knowing to the surface. You're operating in a space that a lot of people would say taboo. And I've been really impressed to follow your story, because even it seems, I can't remember if it's Tourism Nova Scotia or like the province as a whole, but they're like, yes, like extremely supportive in your community. Like, whereas I feel like you plop this in certain places and the NIMBYs would be like, not in our backyard, and very ferocious. Like, did the psychedelics help you lean and be like, fuck yeah, we're just going to do this?
I would say like that there's 2 sides to that. So definitely, I feel very lucky with the psychedelic piece, because there is so much evidence and so much research and so much government and community funding and all that kind of stuff that I feel will be a lot easier for me to navigate than the dungeon has been. The dungeon has not come without community pushback.
Gotcha.
And I mean, I live in a very religious, tiny neighborhood.
Oh, they love dungeons.
They love dungeons. Yeah.
I love them some.
I think that, certainly my hope is that, I've had a number of retreats. I am unbelievably respectful of, sound and like I don't have people outside doing things. Everything is within the confines of the space. Everything I've done, I've met with the county, I've met with the deputy mayor, I've done, and the MLA, like I've met with community members so that they're aware of what I'm doing, and hope that they'll have an understanding that I'm doing this coming from a place of, I want people to feel safe, and I want people to feel loved, and I want people to not feel shame and not feel guilt, and to see the beauty in all of this. And so I think over time, many will come around, and there's always going to be people that are not going to be okay with what I'm doing, and that's okay too. And I will continue to be respectful, and I will continue to offer the space to anyone that wants to come. My plan for the summer is to have like a community event where like people can come and bring their kids and have a pool party and have some live music, just to like show them that I'm human and that I'm not here to hurt them.
Normalize it.
Yeah.
Normalize it. Bring your flogs too if you want, but
Off
up
onto
to
the
you.
diving board. Like,
Yeah. I think that is great though, because it's normalizing something, because it's also saying like, this is for adults. This is an adult world, but we are part of the community and
Totally.
we're doing normal human things and exploration. And so just that of, it's not this secretive little world that has to be separate from the community.
Well, and also that we're teaching our kids good values about and not shaming our children and
Yes.
not, making
Look
them
what
feel
religion
safety,
did to us.
consent.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
it's wild, the repercussions that I didn't even realize till much later in my adult life. And then you start to audit and be like, why do I feel that way in these spaces? And when you start to pare it down, you're like, it's fucked up.
Yeah.
It is fucked up. You're like, thanks a lot, church life. Like, you gave a lot of work to unravel.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And I think like it'll be interesting for me. I plan on like I'm kind of going through the process right now of getting a sperm donor and having a child on my own.
Wow.
And
Congrats, man.
it will be very interesting to have a child in this world. But I also feel like my kid is definitely going to grow up with fully accepting all of the things. And, and just like my parents did for me, I think, it's luckily not this like burden that I have to carry. And hopefully, maybe some around me will also see that it's not that hurtful. And in fact, it's actually helping. So,
Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads us into our, you ready for this, Kristina?
Ready.
Motivation maintenance.
So we like to leave our listeners with a little tool or nugget of wisdom to kind of implement a little bit of what we spoke of today. And so I feel like speaking to those that are curious or have that deep-seated curiosity, what would be your best advice for them to start that mental and physical exploration with themselves?
I would say a really good place to start is there's a quiz online that you can do, BDSM.org. I think that's right. And basically it's a quiz that like will ask you questions and will help you kind of discover what things you might be looking into exploring or what might be intriguing for you. And it kind of prints you out a list of like percentages. So like you might be 97% dominant and a little bit into rope and a little bit into this. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a starting place if all of this is new. So I would say to start with that. And I would also start with trying to identify what comes up for you as no's. So I think in any relationship, it's really important from the very beginning to communicate with our partners or a play partner or someone that we might be exploring these things with, what feels like an absolute no and is off the table, so that is communicated early on and that it's not something that might cause some disconnect in the relationship. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't recall because I know I didn't
sorry, go ahead,
resend you the thing. But do you happen to have a quote?
A quote? I think here, like our quote for the space is like leaning into discomfort. I think so much of the time, there's all of this focus on like getting comfortable and being comfortable and setting up tools for comfort. And if I've learned anything from psychedelics and BDSM, the more that we step into discomfort, the more learning that we have, the more growth we have, the more in love with ourselves that we feel. And I think as hard and challenging as it is to step in discomfort, it's also the most powerful thing you'll ever do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that facet. It's a metaphor for not just exploring those places, but life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, first, thank you so much for coming and joining us. And that was fantastic. It's something that I know for myself that still has a lot of like discomfort out of getting out of, the box, if you will. Even just this conversation gives just so much information, but just such amazing starting points. And you as a human just make that whole world just seem so safe. And so just even speaking to you, so I can only imagine you as a facilitator in real time, what that would be like for people. So as women, as just humans, we deeply appreciate the work that you're doing, because I think we get in that space where we're like, ooh, we get silly about it and giddy about it. And yeah, there is, playfulness within it, but the conversation we had today, it's just like, I know that I got a ton out of it. I can only imagine anyone that listening is going to get a ton of it. So I can't even imagine the people that are having your experience, what they get out of it. So we appreciate your time and appreciate what you're doing.
Where can people find you?
Probably the easiest place is on Instagram. So Coastal Clarity _Discomfort Spa is the retreat space. And then my personal account, which I post a lot of stuff on as well, is at SherKris. So SherKris. And then my latex account, like Mistress K Latex, is at Sher. So SHER _latex. So
amazing. And we'll make sure to put those in the show notes as well. So if you are listening and you're like, oh no, I don't remember and have to rewind, which that dates me because we don't rewind things these days. But you know what I mean? You can just head to the show notes and have a click and find it there. Because I'm sure if people reach out to you, if there's any questions or interests, that you'll be happy to respond to them.
Absolutely. I would love that.
Amazing. Well, Lauren,
thank you again, Kristina. And folks, that is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Laura Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.